Love and marriage.
Hello, everyone. Sorry we're starting a minute late here. We don't have Kyle Roof today. He has some family matters that needed attending to, so we're sending him all our best thoughts, and we hope everything is okay with him. But he says he'll be back next week, and that he misses you guys, and he's been thinking about you. So hopefully you feel the love. So Clint, uh, but he says he'll. Uh, what are you looking forward to in the next couple of shows? What do you think we might be doing in those next couple of shows? We know what we're doing today, but what do you think we might be doing in the next couple of shows?
You're gonna release a push button software that reduces all work, eliminates all work in SEO. It builds the website for you and ranks it automatically.
No, not at all. All right, let me share my screen and we will dive right in. And I will hint more about future shows later.
Sweet.
So I'm going to present to everyone.
Just highlights to you guys how much I pay attention during your meetings.
And it's showing me the wrong one. Swap display. Again, I am a pro. People, do not attempt this at home. Okay, so today we are talking about the most broadly applicable ranking factors. But before that, we'll get into some boilerplate. So we're SEO Fight Club. If you want to learn about us, you can go to this URL, and we have brief bios about our history, so we won't waste your time going into those. And then Clint also runs this amazing YouTube show called SEO This Week, where he goes through hundreds of articles about SEO and reduces it down to the 5 or 10 that really matter the most. And so you got to check this out. Clint, what can people expect to see on the latest episode?
So this week we examined a case study by Ahrefs. They did a whether traffic to your backlinks is actually a ranking factor. It's pretty decent. There's obviously some flaws to it, but we kind of expected that. We went over it last week that there's going to be flaws to link building testing. Another one is another case study with Brian and BuzzSumo on content marketing, which is actually pretty cool. I like it just because you always run out of ideas on content. And then talking with Matt, his PR service that I talked so highly about the show. He just goes over it and some of the features of it and why I like it. I think it's cool. So
very cool. And I, highly recommend that if you spend a lot of time pouring through SEO articles, this can reclaim those hours. So definitely check this show out because it's a huge time saver for me. It gets you to all the really awesome content without all the effort of having to dig through, 15, 20 different websites to get to it.
Yeah.
So again, our topic bomb, the most broadly applicable ranking factors. And we're currently doing a YouTube experiment. We noticed in our YouTube data that it says that only 20% of our viewers are subscribers. And that's just boggling my mind because there's so much growth opportunity there. So I'm going to make a heartfelt plea to anyone who's planning to watch future shows, please hit that subscribe button. Because if we can get a significant spike in subscriptions, it will prove that YouTube's data is probably correct. And so we're wondering, is that 80% non-subscribers real or not? And what we need is a huge spike on this one show to prove if that number is valid. So join our experiment and hit that subscribe, and we'll let you know next week how it turns out.
Don't forget to use the little bell thingy to hit that as well to get the emails saying that the show's going live. So
Yeah, yeah. And if 80% of our viewers are not subscribed and they hit that button, we should be able to see a record breaking spike. So hopefully you'll join us in the experiment. So I'm going to show you data. This data comes from my software. A lot of people know that I create the Cora SEO software, which is a factor measurement tool. You basically enter in your keywords and it goes and gets the top 100 results for your search terms, and then it measures over 600 SEO factors on each of those top 100 results. And then we do statistical correlation and we make recommendations on which factors you need to tune by how much. But there's a recent feature in this software where people can opt in and opt out of sharing their correlation data anonymously with our community. And so what we have in the shared database now is almost 11,000 Cora reports covering, 550 factors that correlated strongly. And, it's covering over 5,000 different keywords. And this data is growing. So we're going to have just a huge volume of time-based correlation data, which is very exciting stuff. So today, we're going to look at some of this data, and we're going to look at what are the most broadly applicable and strongest correlating factors across this whole data set. So this is the gold. If you're looking for data about SEO factors and which ones probably work, as broadly as possible across all sites, this is about as good as it's going to get. Now, I do still think that to get the best information for your particular page, you need to measure your exact keyword for your exact page and get that data. I think that's the most applicable to your situation. But if you just wanted to broadly know what appears to work, across the web, that's kind of what we're looking at today. Any thoughts on that, Clint?
I like the broad, and I think that this data is going to go really well when my more narrow, where I do it by markets and by markets. I think combined, we'll see a lot of really good intelligence.
So, one more thing I need to mention about this data is that to understand a lot of the factors we're going to show you, you need to understand Google matchwords. And they're also referred to as variant keywords or variations. And so you're probably already familiar with this if you use Cora or Pop. But if you don't use those tools, you might not know what this is. So when you do a search in Google, and you can see the Google results in the screenshot of my software here. And we're highlighting these yellow words in those search results. But the thing is we made them yellow so you could see them. It was Google that made them bold. And the reason Google is making them bold is because they're saying, look how relevant our search results are for the keywords you enter. They're showing their search quality by making those bold. But it's a two-way street because they're also telling you that these are the terms that make your page relevant for this search. So we collect all of those and we measure them everywhere they occur. And so that's what these matchwords are. So when you see a factor in the data I'm going to show you, if it says keywords in H1 tags, it means any combination of these variant keywords that we're showing you now, but for whatever term. And if the factor name says search terms in H1 tags, then it means exactly the search term you use to search in Google. So as long as you understand those two distinctions, that keywords means any combination of these relevant bolded terms from Google, and search terms means exactly your search terms, then most of these factors will make a lot more sense to you. Any comment on that, Clint?
I think it was good that you went over that. That kind of confuses people when you're talking about keywords and different keywords to use in your content when you're using these tools. I think one of the first things I had to learn to grasp too is why you were calling this what it was. But when you break it down simply, it's easy to find. You don't need the software to do it, but you're looking for the bolded words in search. So that makes a lot more sense when you explain it that way.
So there's going to be some table data, and these are the headers for that table data. So I just wanted to briefly go over them so that people have an idea of what they are, and that later on, if you're a little confused, you can come back and read these descriptions. So the ordinal is just the rank of the factor in terms of the strongest average correlation with respect to rank position in Google, which is the nerdy way of saying number 1 is the strongest factor and number 550 is the weakest factor. So just keep in mind that ordinal is that factor ranking. The factor ID is a made-up ID that I use in Quora so that customers can tell me exactly which factor they're talking about when they have issues or questions. So they can give me that factor ID and I can go to it right away in their report. I can find it in the spreadsheet, or I can look it up in the source code and see what the software is doing for exactly that factor. So that factor ID is just a made-up, unique identifier, and we have one for every factor we can measure. The name of the factor we talked about before. If it says keywords in sentences, it means those variant keywords that Google is making bold. And if it says search terms in sentences, that it means exactly the search terms you entered into Google. The number 1 max. So this is across thousands of keywords and thousands of reports. Number 1 max is the maximum value for that factor across the whole set. So that is your best outlier, your best maximum outlier for that factor. The page 1 average is the average value from the top 10 results for the factor across all the reports. So we're taking the average of all those page 1 averages and showing you what the whole data set has. And then we have the correlation coefficient from the top 100 results across all reports. So how strongly does it correlate with rankings in Google? And we have 2 correlation coefficients. The first one is across the top 100 results, but the correlation by page is across the average measurements by page. So the average measurement for page 1, the average measurement for page 2, all the way to page 10. So it covers the exact same results. The only difference is there's 100 samples in the first one, and when you go by page, there's only 10 samples. And the correlations actually can change based on whether or not you do it one way versus the other. So we present both. And then the keywords column, this is the percentage of unique target search terms that had this factor is a significant correlation. So this is how broadly applicable this factor was to the whole set. So that's a very important number. Any questions there, Clint?
Nope.
All right. So now we'll get into some data. So I've broken these up into sets of 10 because I don't want to overwhelm with a lot of tabular view. So we are going to go over the top 50 factors from all this data. Oh, let me go back. I didn't explain about the data. So 11,000 reports, 5,000 keywords, 4,700 of them were from desktop searches, and 500 and some were from mobile searches. And we also look at the kinds of queries that were in there. So over 2,000 of the queries analyzed were question queries. So they start with question words. 329 of them were sentiment queries. So best red apples or awesome cars. 67 of them were commercial intent queries, which I find surprising. The buy red apples, those are the ones I go for first, but it looks like a lot of Quora users go for those last, I guess. And then queries that have top ranking directory sites. These tend to be location-based queries. So Miami plumbers or Los Angeles lawyers, where Yelp and Avo and all those directory sites tend to rank 1, 2, and 3. So we have some idea about what's in our data with this metadata. So when we go back here, we start with the first factor, and this factor is blowing up the Quora community right now. Like, people are losing their mind over this first factor. It's brand new. It was introduced in Quora 4.8.1, and it's getting updated in 4.8.2. This is the number of non-zero factors. It's getting renamed, so its new name is going to be number of factors used. And what it measures is how many factors that we know of and can measure, how many of those factors are being used on each page in the top 100 results. And what we find when we measure that is that it is the strongest correlating factor ever discovered. So we loosely call it factor diversity. So in our field measurements of real world data, we see this thing being profoundly strong. And there's
when you say strong, you're like the number one site has the most, the number two, and it's progressive. You can see that progressively down.
Yeah. Yeah, and not only that, it's like the feedback is everybody's coming back saying all of their keywords have this as number one. And it's like we've never seen that with a factor before.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of this thing that we're still learning about. So I wouldn't dive into it and change all of your sites instantly. And there's actually a bug in this factor in that it's currently only measuring the fast factors. So Quora is highly threaded. If you've ever heard somebody complain about Quora's CPU utilization, that's because Quora will measure all these factors in parallel threads. And it turns out that even though I check this factor last, because of when those threads end, it's only counting the fast factors that are faster than it. And the slower factors aren't included in the counts. And that's going to be corrected in 4.8.2. And so we'll see what impact that has on the data. But yeah, it's basically measuring, website 1 uses 65 factors and website 13 has 22 factors, and we see that trend a lot.
Isn't that like obvious though? The better optimized you are, by default you would have more factors.
It's totally obvious, and it took a numbers guy who was combing through Quora data, and he heard me make some claims, and he said, I wonder if those claims are true. I'm going to look for some data to support that. So he dove into Quora data, trying to prove or disprove some claims I had made. And he was like, hey, I tallied these up and ran the correlations. I think you need to take a look at it. So I was like, I think you're right. And I put it into Quora 4.8.1 as a factor, and it's just everywhere. And yeah, I've never heard anybody in SEO in the past mention factor diversity or mention measuring factor diversity. Now, the thing to keep in mind with this one factor is we're trying to isolate it in testing, and we have not been able to do that. We can measure it in the field. We have not been able to test it in a controlled environment. One of the problems with it is it violates single variable testing because it's factor diversity. It's inherently multivariable. So it has a ton of testing complicating factors. And so a lot of our attempts at testing factor diversity have failed. So if you have ideas on how we could test this, let me know in the comments, because we are trying to crack that nut as quickly as possible. So I think we spent enough time on the new shiny factor. So that's one of the big ones. But keywords in the HTML tag. So the HTML tag is your whole body or your whole document. And so we're measuring keyword usage throughout the whole document. Does it surprise you that that's the number 2 factor?
No, not at all. Especially after we already talked about the density stuff. And I kind of expected more keywords related factors to be in this top 10, honestly.
Yeah. And I bet when you look at any one keyword in particular, you will see more keyword related factors at the top. But it's interesting that when you look across the averages, the aggregates of the whole community, that it gets shaken up more.
Yeah.
What about SEMrush organic cost? Now, my understanding of this variable is that it is domain based. It's based on the total number of keywords that a website ranks for. And it looks at the estimated total amount of traffic that all those keyword rankings would produce. And then it estimates what the pay-per-click cost of that traffic would have been. And so it's kind of a crazy daisy chain of estimations, which is weird, but there's an API for it. We can give it a URL and get this data and see if it correlates with rankings. And then bam, it's number 3.
Which I guess you can kind of take that to mean if your site has more traffic, inherently it'll rank higher. That's the only way that I would even consider that. Typically, I don't use a lot of the SEMrush data anyway. But if I saw that, that's what I would assume, is that the sites that are ranking in that top 10 have more traffic. Thus, that's probably one of the reasons why they're ranking more.
Yeah, and that begs the question of does it correlate because it's causing rankings, or does having good rankings equal good traffic?
Yeah.
So there's a cart before the horse problem there. Term frequency. This is an academic factor. It comes from TF-IDF. It's the numerator portion without the IDF. We can't really measure the IDF that Google uses because you have to have Google's database to do that. But we're interested in the numerator portion because if it correlates, then it means that Google's probably using TF-IDF. And lo and behold, number 4, very broadly applicable in that keywords column. It applies to 92 to 93% of all of our keywords. Now that SEMrush data, where it's only applying to 3% or 2.5%, that's because those off-page factors in Quora are optional, and it means that only about 3% of the time are Quora users using SEMrush. So the top factor is 31% because it's only a month old, so there's not a lot of data on it. So that's what those keyword percentages mean. Keywords and sentences, I am not shocked to see that there. And in fact, I'm currently isolating that in single variable testing. So hope to release those tests soon. Any thoughts on sentences?
What does that 63 mean? 63 sentences with the keywords in there, or 63 keywords?
63 keywords appearing in sentences.
Yeah.
And again, this means those bold variations that Google displays.
Yeah. Okay.
So 63 of those variations appearing in sentences.
That's a lot of content.
Page one max, or number one max. So the largest measurement in the number one spot in Google.
539.
Yeah.
Must have been one of Kyle's pages.
Ahrefs rank, this to me indicates that Ahrefs has critical mass in their database to understand generally why things rank. And I think that falls apart when you get sufficiently long tail in your keywords. But if you're looking at keywords that have decent search volume, I think they probably have sufficient data to generally understand what ranks better than what. What's your read on that?
That goes into that case study article that Ahrefs did yesterday, and their domain rank in their own testing was not correlating, but their URL rank was. So I don't know if Quora can split that up based off of their API that they're giving you, but that would be where my next step in this question would be, is that URL rank or domain rank?
Well, Ahrefs, if you're watching, put that URL rank into the API and I'll add it into Quora, and we'll help give you publicity and give you community ideas on how to make it better. And so, and in fact, all of the platform vendors, whatever you surface in your API, let me know and I'll integrate it and we'll promote it and we'll work with you on it. And, we love that stuff.
Yeah. I think them not doing it is kind of silly, in my opinion. The new Moz is coming out. They updated their database now, and they're changing the way DA works. That's releasing next month. Ahrefs did their big change, pissed off a lot of people. They changed it again, and then Majestic changed a lot of stuff too. So and SEMrush is just using Majestic data anyway. So if you just combine those three backlink builders into Quora, it's a great tool. I spend money on APIs for Ahrefs and SEMrush, and I have no problem dropping money for the other two.
Remember a couple years ago when we ran a booth at SMX?
Yep.
Moz promised to get back to me about integrating with Quora, and they never did. So, hey, Moz people, reach out to us. I still want to do it.
In their defense, it did take them 2 years to finally update their bot and fix their database.
Yeah. And they were also going through some pretty massive reorgs at the time. So, I won't fault them too much, but if they want to get their data like equal mind share in our presentations, they need to work with us. So,
yeah. And if you're watching and you're a Moz fan, reach out to them and say, hey, how can we integrate Quora and their data? Is there an API we can use?
Yeah, and I'm happy to integrate. They just need to let me do it. Yeah. That's the trick. So keywords and headings, I am not surprised to see that at all. Oh, the Ahrefs rank, if you look at the keyword percentage, about 7.4% of Quora users typically have that enabled. That's what that percentage is showing me. If everybody had it enabled, I'm sure these would probably be positioned differently. SEMrush organic traffic, that's the estimation based on all of the keywords a domain ranks for. That's why these numbers are huge. What do you think about that? Similar to the organic cost answer?
Yeah, I think so, because they're guesstimating. And how do you don't know for a fact that that's the actual. Well, I can tell you right now, if based off of our own sites, is the traffic that SEMrush says we're getting and what we actually get is completely different. So yeah, it's those two are really. It's just a big guesstimate to me.
Yeah, what I find interesting about it is those guesstimations correlate. And I can't explain why, but they do. And so I think it's worthy of talking about. I just don't have the answers that people probably want for those.
The one thing I can think of is maybe a lot of the data that you're getting is local, and the sites like Yelp and Home Advisor and blah, 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 you get tons of traffic, or maybe even some Amazon e-commerce sites. Those all get traffic, and just by their nature of being there will inflate that SEM rush number, I think.
Yeah.
So that's just a guess.
If you work at SEM Rush and you understand why these numbers are probably correlating as high as they do, reach out to us and we'll follow up in a future episode with your explanation of why you think these are positioned where they are. We'd love to share that. So, keywords and A tags. So A tags are your anchor tags. They're links. And when we say keywords and A tags, it doesn't mean in the attributes like the title attribute or the href attribute. It means in the actual anchor text content portion of the tag. And this is an on-page factor. So it's not inbound links. It's on the page that you're ranking. How many keywords are in the anchor text on those pages. And so the number one maximum across all of the sites was 500 keywords and anchor tags. And on average on page 130. And it's 92% applicable across all keywords. What do you think of
that factor is probably the biggest one that I think I beat you up like every 2 or 3 weeks about that one. Is like, what the hell is the purpose of this, and how do I justify having 30 links on a page? You know what I mean? Especially for a client. I think I figured out a way to do it. I want to actually be able to do it before I say how, but it just seems weird to me that you
know what I think this is? I think this is people gaming keyword mentions on page through their menu navigation.
Yeah.
I think this is people with mega menus, or they're putting all their service areas into the menu. So it's DUI lawyer Los Angeles, DUI lawyer Miami, DUI lawyer Chicago, and they just continue their menu navigation for all of those tuned pages.
Which could be a good indicator that their silo of their sites are set up pretty good. So yeah. I see that too. I just don't like, one, I don't like menus like that. I think it's kind of overkill. And then two, when you don't do that, you kind of, in my opinion, you kind of have to figure out an alternative way to create those links, or just forget about that factor. More often than not, up until this new solution I found, we were just ignoring that factor completely, regardless of where it was at on our sheets.
All right, so now that we looked at the top 10 results, I'm going to skip ahead and let's look at the bottom of the list.
And while you're getting that, we got one question related to this. Is Terry Power, the question was, so only one use of H4, H6 at the top of pages based off of that information that you got there?
Let me go back and explain that better. So this one here, keywords in H1 to H6 tags, this is looking at all headings. So H1 through H6, you want, the number one across the whole set was 55 of those variation keywords and heading tags. The page one average, though, is just 7. And when we look at just the top 3, H1, H2, and H3, it doesn't change by much. The number one has 54 keywords appearing in those 3 types of headings. And the page one average drops to 6. So apparently most of this data is occurring in the top 3 headings, H1 through H3. And that's all we know about this data so far. So the bottom of the list. So the first thing we note is that keywords, what percentage of keywords are affected, it effectively drops to zero. Like it goes to nothing. We were, 90 some percent at the top of the list, and we're 0.02% at the bottom. And our correlations went red because they were no longer statistically significant. So these are kind of the one-hit wonder factors. And so the averages we find and the values we find are terrible. So this is why these are at the bottom of the list. But I just wanted to show those so that you could see how different they are from the factors we find at the top of the list. And so we can see that when we went across all 100 results, this one was a significant, strong correlation. But by page, by average measurement by page, it wasn't. And so we can see when it's significant and when it's not. So let's look at number 2, and we'll start to go through these quicker. We take more time with the high ranking ones because they're more important. Yeah. But the Google result link text matches. So this is in the anchor text of the Google search result. So it's not on your page, it's in the search result. And we correlate those as text as well because they're not always equal to what you define on the page. Google can modify these things, they can truncate these things. So we measure them separately and isolate them as separate factors. And so the Google result link text matches. So in that anchor text of the Google result link, 5 keywords in that link text and 2 on average. That's pretty interesting. What do you think?
I don't know enough about that to comment intelligently, honestly.
So that link text comes from your title text in general. So title text on your page generally becomes the link text in the Google search result. So this is suggesting that having 5 keywords in your title tag is the number 1 max, which I find interesting. Because I'm sure somebody out there tried to do 6, and so maybe there's a cutoff. Be careful.
Why have, if you have a title tag factor, why have the Google result link text factor?
Because your title tag could effectively be 3,000 characters, but what Google's going to show you is going to be much shorter.
Oh, okay. Who would put 3,000 characters in their title tag? You're crazy.
People do it. and I believe in a past show, Kyle even recommended it.
Yeah.
Recommendations will not be honored. Keywords and div tags. So this is a new factor. That's why its percentage is low. I thought it was stupid to measure it originally, and then I got beaten into submission about not having it. So I put it in the last update, and that's why this percentage is as low as it is. I would imagine it would be doing as well as keywords in the HTML tag. Any thoughts on div tags?
No, I didn't. That's kind of like the same. Yeah, I was wondering why you added it, so I don't get it. I think we'd have to hear the counter argument of why it should be there. If it's in the header, the body, then
Well, the specific reason why the people asking for it wanted it was they were saying, do I absolutely have to use paragraph tags? My WordPress theme uses divs instead.
Okay. So you're just, okay. So that's kind of like the EM versus B.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
All right, Google results. So again, talking about the search result stuff, the display URL, so the URL that Google prints on the result, not the actual link used, they can be different, matches in that printed display URL in the search result. So I thought that was cool that correlates as strongly as it does. And I was also surprised to see that the number 1 maximum was also 5 with an average of 2.
That's a long URL.
And a lot of keywords on it.
Yeah. But if you're a follower of Greg Morrison over at OMG, this data here validates his reverse sink or swim model. So if you think about that.
We see more Ahrefs data. Kudos to Ahrefs for getting so many entries at the top of the list. Referring class Cs, referring IPs, and referring domains. Let's knock them out all together. What do you think about those three?
They just released a case study on there. The referring domains was one of their number one correlating factors for rankings. And then the class C and the IP address is kind of, okay, got it. It kind of goes along with that in different sites. Ideally, you want more links on diverse class C addresses, etc. That's just kind of a PBN thought process if you're going that deep anyway. But the referring domains one is really interesting to me. I wish that there was more data in the set of people that were using Ahrefs just to validate what they said. But they based their numbers off of, if I'm remembering correctly, is like 44,000 keywords. And we're only doing 5,000. So, and not everyone's using Ahrefs, but still, as that continues to grow, I like to see if that's, in fact, true.
Yep, and the percentage is higher here than before because in Quora you can opt into specific APIs for different types of data, and these three all come from the Extended Metrics API, and 11% plus of Quora users have that enabled. So that's kind of cool that jumped up in percentage, and that's why it did. Search terms in the body tag and the HTML tag. And so before, when we said keywords in a factor name meant those variations, now it's search terms. So we're talking about the exact search submitted to Google. Any thoughts on those two?
Yeah, I think that's kind of obvious. The number's a little high, but I guess we have to see what the content length is as well when you're using that kind of number. But
oh, geez, yeah, I want to find that out. That one's going in my presentations.
Unfortunately, another one of Kyle's pages.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't find that outlier because they don't actually share the whole report, just the correlation data and the regression lines for the factor measurements. So I don't actually know the URL that produced that outlier. But I want to find that. If you're out there and you know what that outlier is, please contact me. All right, Google result URL matches. So before we said the display URL, which is what they print on the page for you to see is what the URL is, and you'll see the ellipsis in this, and they'll skip around and they'll show you site links in this sometimes, and so it's kind of a bastardized URL in that display URL. This is the actual URL being linked to the Google result URL, and we're looking for matches in that, so those variations. And so 5 matches and 2, so it mirrored the same match count, which is not surprising.
Yeah.
All right, so the SEMrush organic keywords. So again, that's the number of keywords the domain ranks for. So that, globally, that whole domain, that's why those numbers are so big. So to me, again, this indicates that if you have a big website, you tend to rank well. So that might be what this means.
And based off your keywords, there's not a whole lot of people using that. So,
yeah. More keywords and heading tags. So before we saw 1 through 6 and 1, 2, and 3 grouped together. Now it's just 1 and 2. And so we see it's still a strong factor. Keywords in absolute URLs. This is an exploit factor. So if you have an exact match or partial match domain, and you configure your website to use full URLs everywhere it can in the source code, you get extra keyword matches because of all those domain references in the source code. So we count those up, and that's what we're measuring here. What do you think about that particular measurement?
I've always used absolute. There was that way back when is the relative URLs versus absolute URLs debate and which one was better. Um, I think the kind of the industry settled on absolute, so that really makes sense that it would be there, honestly.
All right, LI tags. This one I think correlates so frequently because it's so common in jQuery menu navigation. And it's also common in category product tokens. And it's also common in the comments within comment threads on pages. And it's so very rarely used for an actual HTML list on a page, but it tends to be so fundamentally used for sliders and carousels and menus. And what do you think about keywords and LI tags?
What I wanted to ask about this one is that searching specifically in the body, or is it anywhere in the HTML?
Well, LI tags would have to be in the body to be displayed, is my understanding.
So it's not it's looking at what's displayed versus what's in the code. The reason I'm asking is you can do schema or microdata in microdata format and use LI tags if you want to set up your breadcrumbs, and that kind of takes care of that LI tags thing, because it's it's a pain in the ass making lists for everything, especially when you're competing with 23 there and alone that's a lot. So
well, if your LI tags are in the HTML source, they'll get measured. And if your JavaScript is rendering and adding more LI tags to the DOM, Cora will measure that and include those into the count as well.
So that'd be a good test to see if Cora finds that schema and counts that as LI.
Yeah, if it's in JSON LD and it's not being parsed as HTML, then maybe not. But send me an example of that and I'll fix it. Search terms and sentences. So not surprised to see that there. And again, that's the exact search term submitted to Google. Keywords in the title tag. We all know about titles, so no surprise there. Backlinks. The surprising thing is that, we finally get the backlinks. Where was that? Let me go back one. These referring IPs in Class C. So number 14 is really where we get our first hint of PageRank as a factor. So I find it interesting that backlinks are so far down on this list.
Well, I think that goes with Ahrefs' own data too, is the number of backlinks wasn't necessarily the correlating factor on their data. It was the number of referring domains. That was more important than the number of links. So that might be something significant.
Yeah, and the other thing is, what slice of the pie do these platform APIs have? Because Google says they're aware of over 200 trillion URLs. And most of these platforms claim to know about billions of pages.
Yeah.
And so that's probably statistically relevant. But, there's definitely a large missing piece.
Right. One thing I noticed, and the viewers have noticed too, is the H1s are more important in the data here than it is in the title tag, which I find interesting as well. What I think is happening is there was a big push where everyone was saying your title tag and your H1 should always be different. I always kept them the same because I'm lazy. But I think that we're more apt to put keywords in our H1s out of and then versus the title tag versus fear of over optimization, which might account for that. I know Kyle has a test, and I'm pretty sure it's title H1, H3, H2, and kind of in that order. And after Google wiped out all his testing sites and that thing, I think he has to set them all back up specifically for this test model. And then maybe Josh Brzezinski has a test that's still running too that'll say where those positions are. But I kind of find this one. I think those are backwards. 22 and 26 are backwards, just based off. Yeah, I think they're backwards.
You know, I tend to agree with you that in general, when I run a specific keyword, I tend to find the title tag above the headings.
Mhm.
And in isolated testing, my own isolated testing of the top performing HTML tags, which ones rank the best out of the whole HTML specification. Up at the top is typically title tag. So when you test it in single variable testing, yeah, I think the title tag wins every time.
Okay. And Lee kind of, yeah, he he said the same thing I did, but he did it in Nerd Talk. And it's basically adoption rate can skew correlation in a highly competitive SERP. If all 100 pages have keyword in the title, the correlation is 0. You cannot tell which factor is stronger strictly from correlation.
Was that Lee? Did you say that was Lee? So yeah, if we go back here and this little factor right here, I didn't discover this amazing new factor. That was Lee. And so we're hoping to have Lee on the show next week. I mentioned that I'd talk about what's coming up. And so one of the shows coming up, if it's not next week, if he's not ready, it'll probably be the week after. But hopefully it's next week. We're going to have Lee on, and he's going to show us what he's been testing. So it's going to be cool because he combs through our data and he tries to prove and disprove things I say. And so he's going to come on and show us some of the things he's working on, some of the questions he's trying to tackle. So I hope you join us, and I hope he's ready for next week.
Yeah, and take a nap before, because those two talking technical stuff is going to be pretty boring.
We'll spice it up. We'll spice it up. All right, so where were we? Title tags, backlinks. So text backlinks, this one I know is differentiating image backlinks. So people linking to you via an image versus linking to you with anchor text. So that's my understanding of the distinction of this. No follow, I think everybody understands that. What do you think about no follow and text backlinks?
I've always been a fan of no follow. There's people that go out and say no follow doesn't do anything. I completely disagree with that.
Well,
but again, you can get stuck in a no follow versus do follow conversation forever.
I'd like to point out that no follow beat text backlinks on their own.
Yeah.
And no follow beat just backlinks on their own.
Yeah. So, and then the text thing, that kind of makes sense, because the anchor text, you're doing your anchor text variations, all that stuff, and I can see that coming into play there.
Referring pages, so another authority metric. Moz PA.
If you look at that, you look at the referring domains and the referring pages, you're averaging about 2 links. What is it, 2 links per page? I have to get a calculator. Let me get a calculator. Oh, 100 links per domain is typically what you're averaging right there. So 74 referring domains was the average, and then the average is 7,000 links. It's 100 links per domain, which kind of indicates that site-wide links help.
That's an interesting stat. I think I need to calculate that and add that as an independent factor. All right. So PA. So page authority is a score developed by Moz that predicts how well a specific page will rank on a search engine result page. Page authority score ranges from 1 to 100, with higher scores corresponding to a greater ability to rank. So I don't really know the components of these API numbers, but what they're saying is that this is their, I guess, estimation at the page level of what PageRank is. and it does correlate, strongly. Again, it's only applicable to 5.6% of the time because only 5.6% of Quora users are using the DOM detailer API.
Yeah, PAs, as a black hat, knowing how easy it is to manipulate those T metrics currently, that's just, to me, that's, you just wasted like 4 spots on your list, in my opinion. And until they update that database and change the way PA and DA works, and it's no longer easy to manipulate with trackbacks. Like I literally can do it with trackbacks and make a site look great. But in fact, it's all trackbacks making those numbers look good. So I think it's something that they need to fix. And in my opinion, those 3, you just wasted some line space on your spreadsheet.
Okay, Moss, you heard it here. Please contact me and we'll bring you on and have a discussion about it. So we'll give you a chance to state your case, and so don't get upset. Just come talk with us, and
this is a fight club. You can be upset if you want. Get over it.
We'll talk it out, but reach out to us. All right, Google result number of site links. I'm actually a little surprised that this is a correlating thing. Well, actually not. I guess they only do site links on page 1, so they tend to correlate. I'm surprised there's enough data to get a correlation. Not so much surprised that it does correlate, surprised that there's enough data to measure it.
That just indicates to me that people are catching on that, doing the schema for the site links, get those to pop, and doing branding, etc. is, it's paying off for people, and it just kind of shows right there in that.
Yeah. Ahrefs domain rating, so seeing it correlating strong.
You can show domain rating, but you can't show URL rating.
It just has to be in the API. So the problem is they didn't put UR into the API, and so I need them to do that so that I can draw it into Quora.
Okay.
But it should be a no-brainer for them. It might just be an oversight.
Especially since they just proved that URR is more correlating than domain.
So you heard it here, Ahrefs. We'll promote UR if you put it in the API.
Yeah, everybody, if you know Tim, go beat up Tim.
All right, keywords in the first 100 words. So to clarify that one, we strip out the head block. We delete all CSS and scripts. Then we delete all comments, and then we delete all HTML tags. And of that content text that's left over, we look at what's in the first 100 words. And so the page 1 max has 39 keywords in the first 100 words, and page 1 average has 8. That's a lot, I think. I guess I'm not surprised by it, but
yeah, that high up, essentially that would be above the fold. You get 39 keywords. You might be ranking high, but you're probably not doing very well for conversions.
Well, it depends, because that could be hidden content. Like, there are CSS ways to get this text at the top, but to display it at the bottom. Yeah. But I don't think people are doing that on average. So I think on average, these are honest, non-trickery measurements.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting one. I can't explain it either. Referring subnets, referring IPs, just a different platform there. Majestic, I tried to integrate with you guys, but you put quotas on software integrators where if we don't deliver you enough customers, you start billing us heavily. And no other platforms do that. And I want to give Majestic a fair shake and give them equal coverage with all the other platforms, but they won't let me integrate without making me liable for sales quotas. So if you can reconsider that policy, I'd be happy to integrate you and give you fair coverage of your data. But again, it's up to you to let me do it. So if you're a Majestic fan and you want direct Majestic integration, let them know. End rant. What do you think about that current issue?
Does their IP or API give you referring domain counts too?
Well, I only get this information for both Moz and Majestic via DOM detailer. So I need Majestic and Moz to let
DOM detailer's not sending it to you. You won't get it.
Yeah, and so I need these guys to let me go direct to their data, because that's the right thing to do for their users. You know, one of the big problems that's there is I have customers that come to me saying, I want to use Cora. This data is killer. I need to do this. And they get in and say, well, I don't, Cora doesn't support Majestic, so I have to get Ahrefs, and I don't need Ahrefs and Majestic. So they let go of their Majestic subscription. Yeah. And that's terrible. I don't want to make people do that. It's not fair to Majestic, but Majestic needs to let me integrate. The other case is somebody new comes in and says, I don't have Ahrefs or Majestic. Which one should I get? Oh, well, only Ahrefs works with Cora. Sorry, Majestic. So they really shot themselves in the foot with that policy. And I really hope they revisit that.
Yeah, that's probably, back in the day when it was really easy to get free data out of them at scale. And then they had to change that policy because they were losing a lot of customers just because they were giving that stuff away for free. So I see why they did it. I just think that they could have been a little bit more open to it. Maybe you can reapproach them now and say, look, I got 500 customers. Here's 30 of them said they want it. Can we have it now?
Well, the thing is I'll never sign a stupid contract, and they want me to sign a stupid contract.
Well, we'll get someone from Canada to sign it for you, and not enforceable now.
Yep. So again, Majestic, I'm happy to do the work of doing the integration, and I will promote the heck out of it for you. I'll be a good steward of the integration, but you have to let me do it, and the contract can't be stupid.
Yep.
Google result document matches. So the document is the name of the file you're serving. So the default name of the file you tend to serve is index.html, but it could be sportscars.php. That's a document. So the document that's referred to in the URL of the Google result having matches in that. And that's a factor that is actually, I'm surprised it's that low. When I isolate it in single variable testing, it's nearly as powerful as title. And when you combine having the same match in the document name with the exact same match in the title, there's like this gestalt effect, and you get this incredible boost in single variable testing.
So essentially, though, isn't that just having the keyword in your URL?
Nope, because it's different from other factors where it's just in the path, or just in a URL parameter, or just in the domain name.
So it's the end. Could it be like the end page? Like your page is episode 6, episode -6. So isn't that the Google result document?
Well, it's if you've named your file. So if it's episode 6.html or episode 6.php, that would be the document.
So would you recommend that people actually start using that .html, et cetera, or just keep it the way they are?
I would say you need to experiment with it, because in single variable testing, combining the exact match in the document name along with in the title produce some jaw-dropping effects.
Okay.
So I'd experiment with it. All right, so here we are, last 10. So we see search terms and headings. Again, that's the exact search term you used in Google. We see some more Majestic data via DOM detailer.
He was referring to me.
Leading keywords and heading. So leading means the heading starts with the keyword. It's not an exact match in the heading, and it's not in the middle or in the end. It's at the beginning. So that's an interesting one. Do follow backlinks way down here in the bottom part of the top 50. So
below no follow, mind you.
yeah.
What is the difference between that one that we saw before and this one? Ahrefs has no follow backlinks.
The Ahrefs no follow backlinks was correlating the number of no follow backlinks.
And then this whether they're there or not.
Yes, whether they have any at all or none.
Okay.
Keywords and H2 tags specifically made the top 50. Not surprised by that. Keywords and meta descriptions. So all you meta description haters, it's in the top 50. So it's easy to tune. There's other reasons you might want to do it. See our episode on meta descriptions. Any thoughts on meta descriptions?
Well, I get my own experience tells me that I should have the keywords in there. I've done changes where I've added the keywords and meta descriptions, and that's the only thing I did, and it increased the rankings. And then I've also learned from Jim McKelly that you can leave them blank, and Google's going to pull in what it needs, which is, and you did a show on meta descriptions, and it kind of validated that based off of what your rank tracker was saying. So, in my opinion, Ted gets his rank tracker done right. Leave the meta descriptions blank. Google does its little testing, which you can see in Ted's rank tracker. Then we pick the winner and set that permanently. And that's probably the best way to handle meta descriptions.
Yeah, that would be cool if it was an automated plugin that detected Google's testing and picked the one that had the best ranking and just automatically did it after 2 weeks.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So if some aspiring WordPress plugin developer...
I'm going to write that down. My developer's going to hate you.
And then finally, the number 50 was leading keywords and H1 through H3 tags. I'm not surprised by that at all.
I think those H tag ones kind of, essentially, if you're hitting the top 10 where we saw all those H tags, you're going to hit these two. Maybe the formatting and stuff. So I think if you just build those H tags like Kyle and I teach you, is your H1 is your exact match, H2 and H3s are your related searches, Google Trend searches, etc., to get the multi variations in there, and then your H4 is exact match again. You're going to do just fine. You can hit all of those.
Yeah. So how are you doing on time, Clint? You have a little time?
All I have scheduled is this show. So we got time for questions, guys. If you have more questions, beat us up. I love answering questions. It's the best part of my show, I think. So, and I know Ted likes talking this stuff. So, and there's one in here. Here at the bottom, it's Sean Mitchell. He said he's still confused on document versus the WordPress permalink.
Well, WordPress uses dynamic URLs, so they often won't even display a document. So documents are old school HTML when you would actually create a text file, give it a file name, and upload it to a folder on your server, and your web server would serve the document. And that's where you would get, these keyword.html and keyword.php. So if you're not a web developer, it doesn't surprise me that URL documents confuse you. But it's something you can look at if you investigate the structure of a URL or the components of a URL. The document is a part of that URL, but it's often hidden in WordPress.
So let me show.
Oh, you gonna share screen?
Oh yeah, maybe I'm saying thing. Okay, hopefully you can see it now. So this is a standard format that WordPress spits out, right?
Yep.
Okay, and then you're saying that by adding HTML, now it's a document.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, whether or not Google will take the last word in a URL and make that the document or make it part of the path, is that category part you had as part of the path. So maybe that last word without the HTML, Google thinks is path. But if you add the .html, I'm certain you force it to be the document portion.
The end. So you essentially you're saying, hey, Google, this is the end of that path.
Yeah, and one trick is that you can look at the URL and URI classes for your favorite programming language. I know we all have one. And if you look at those, there will be helper methods for parsing a URL and getting specific parts of a URL. So usually you can fire up your favorite language and put in a URL and use those classes to parse the document and see what you get in those edge cases.
Okay. Yeah, I think just like if you guys want to test that before you go all out and add HTML to all your permalinks, is maybe just create one page with that HTML in there. I guess that would be probably the best thing to do. Or if you have like a mass site builder, fire one up on a test domain and see if it helps in your market. That would be a significant URL change, in my opinion. It'd be like going from HTTP to HTTPS almost. Let's see. Stephen Hockman, have you ever tried to put the exact match keyword in every single on-page factor?
I've done a lot of keyword stuffing, but that's downright crazy. I should probably try that sometime.
I think you already proved the keyword density is, that's. I don't want to say if it's a factor or it's ignored. It's the higher you had a really significant keyword density that was testing number one, it'd be like your controls. So
he's actually testing several things at once with his question. So he's saying, okay, diversity is a thing, but what about diversity with keyword stuffing? Is that like superpower? So that's the interesting part of that, is it's combining keyword stuffing with diversity.
I did it. I tried it out.
Worthy test.
Yeah, that'll be just fun. If it works, go for it.
Let us know.
Yeah. Nick Leon. So if you focus on getting a few fundamentals right, like H1 through H4, title tags, image alts, etc., shouldn't we then stop obsessing too much about every little factor?
Well, here's the gotcha. Here's where we pull the rug away from you, because it looks like we opened up the treasure box and gave you all the gold. The problem is that this specific advice we showed you and these specific factors we showed you are probably not the correct factors and measurements you need to actually compete with for the keyword you're targeting. The only way you get that specific advice for what you need to do so that you can get the rankings with the minimum allocation of time, effort, and money is to measure your URL for your keyword specifically.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the argument of people saying, oh, the proper word count for a blog post is 1,400 words. That is certainly true for a keyword somewhere, but it's probably not true for your keyword that you're writing for.
Yeah. I think to go on with that is what he listed is really your basic on-page optimization. And yes, if you do that, you don't have to obsess about every little factor, but knowing every little factor helps you find out when you can stop doing on-page and when you can start doing link building.
And outliers, I found throughout my career, I was an in-house SEO and online retail for over 17 years. And outliers tend to be some of the best opportunities, short-term opportunities you can find. Like I found years ago when iPhones came out that I was getting a ranking boost by putting the Apple Touch icons on my pages. And 6 weeks to 3 months later, I stopped getting a boost from it. And I wondered why. I was like, wow, that's incredible. The data said to put, Apple Touch icons on the page to get a ranking boost, and I did. And then HTML5 came out, and the data said the same thing. It said, hey, if you go to HTML5, you're going to see a quick boost across the board. So I took all the stores, made them HTML5 as fast as I could. Bam, got a ranking boost. About 6 weeks later, 3 months later, it all came back down to baseline. And what I suspect is happening is Google has a training set and for web spam, and they're kind of gauging how spammy your page looks. And when something new comes out that isn't in the web spam training set, it makes you look less spammy, just a little bit. And that little bit site-wide on a massive site could be a big result in traffic. And that's why it probably stops working as soon as the web spammers start doing it too. It stops having advantage. Mm. And so that's my theory on that. And but I think you need to look at outliers. You need to investigate outliers because there's probably some gems of tactics in those outliers, and there's probably some hidden opportunities.
Jonathan Beal he might have missed it, but the software find ranking factors from backlinks. And yeah, Jonathan, it does, but within the limitations of the APIs that are provided. Next question is, do you guys believe Google when they say they don't care about or value Better Business Bureau links for local? No, I don't. I think that's just a good way to push you off. The Better Business Bureau links is essentially a citation. A citation builds your brand. Building your brand, you build your entity. You get an entity machine ID number because now you're a established entity. So I think if they say that, I haven't heard them say that. You probably have to point to me to where that was said. They're full of crap. They're lying to you.
Yeah, I think at a minimum, it probably counts as a link. So it's at least a link or better.
Yeah.
So
there was one more in here that I saw earlier. Let's see. Ahref versus Dom Taylor, is the difference enough to say use Ahrefs instead?
Dom D. Taylor and Cora dates back to when the Majestic stuff didn't have URL based. So in the next update, the Majestic part of Dom D. Taylor will be URL based. Oh. So it's going to improve a little bit. Dom Detailer is by far the most affordable thing. So if you have no funds to work with or just a tiny amount of funds, it's better than not having the data.
Okay.
Ahrefs tends to be the go-to one for most of the community.
Yeah. I prefer Ahrefs over the other ones anyway, so that's kind of a no-brainer for me, but it's really just, who do you trust more, honestly, so. Jonathan Beal, do we shoot to match average or closer to the number one?
If you want to be at the top of page one, you need to be above average for page one. And, I know a number of famous SEOs out there say you need to target the average. And in my experience, that's a recipe for getting to page 2 or 3. So I think you need to be above average to win. And the question is, what is that formula to win? But I think you need, whatever that formula ends up being, you need to be above average.
Okay. And then soft S's, are links worthless if they are not from sites that get real traffic? That one's based off of probably it's feedback from our last show when we talked about links. The test that Ahrefs did, it correlates, but is not as important as URL rank in one test that they did, or number of referring domains in another analysis of their data. I prefer links that have traffic. And if you look at what Jordan Pierce teaches, NFG guys, they have a whole system where they create websites that build traffic, and then they use those websites as their PBNs. and in their testing, they've seen it become the link was better. They got more power out of it, and that's messing with that Google patent. And I pointed out that patent yesterday. The proximity to click is, I think, is how it was referred. Basically, where is that backlink, and it's more valuable on the likelihood it's getting clicked, and that's how Google is measuring the value of those backlinks according to that patent, which is what I think might, and really this is a lot of might and a lot of guess and a lot of I think might have more of a factor than traffic. So maybe I'm wasting my time seeking out websites that have the keywords and having traffic, but then again, maybe I'm not. So that's one of the downsides, and Ted can probably attest to this, is how do you test link building, and can you say for a fact that that link versus that link is working? It's so hard. Lee kind of pointed it out, is to test the traffic theory alone, you have to build a PBN network, get all the traffic to that, and then build your backlinks and hope that traffic's filtering through your backlinks. So it's a hard test to build or conceptualize, much less build. So
yeah, it's a tricky one.
Fucking
well, there goes our YouTube advert.
You can edit it out. It's those robot calls. I swear to God, I got like 100 messages from robot calls.
Yeah, we just got turned off for monetization.
Let's see. Do you support posts with internal links? Really help boost ranks. Wondering what the threshold is for me to stop making subscribing posts. If that's too. So they do help. They do help significantly. I've ranked pages only using internal links, but they're also much better for buffers for your backlinks. So you have your money page that you really care about. You build some referring pages for traffic, informational searches versus buyer searches. Your buyer searches is the top of your silo. And then there is a threshold to stop. And typically what I do is I start off with 4 in local. I'll build 4 right off the bat and see that it works. And then you just add one like every other week or week if you want to, just based on how fast you can get Google to crawl and see some results on your money page. And once you see that just stops, that's when you can just stop building supporting posts at the end of the day and just start building links to those and save yourself some time.
So, Clint, I don't do any group buys because I'm a software developer, and group buys make me sad. But you have any group buys you'd recommend?
The ones that, here's the problem with group buys is, one, if you do it a lot, you're going to hurt software developers, and then they don't update their stuff very much. And 2, if you do a group buy, and I've seen this endlessly with group buys, is you will do all your market research and your group buy software stuff, and then your competition also happens to be in your group buy stuff, and you're doing all their work for them, which is also a good way if you want to, to market, find new research and stuff. So typically, I'm not in any group buys anymore for software, for tools. But if you want to get into that, it's a forum called IMG Forum. IMG. You have to get invited. Don't message me, because you have to, if you are invited, the person who invited you is responsible for you. So if you go out there and you get in the forum and then you start sharing what's in that forum outside of the forum, they'll kick you out, and then they'll kick the person who invited you out. And I just like being a member of there. So but it's called I Am Glory. You can go in there and find someone that knows, likes, and trusts you, and send you an invite. And that's the best way if you want to get into that group buy stuff. And the other one is Scrapebox. If you guys should be, if you don't have a Scrapebox, if you don't have any software, Scrapebox should be the first one that you get, because there's so much tools inside of there. And she's made that it's Mac compatible now. There are some quirks with the Mac version that'll just anger you to no end, but it's Mac and PC now. So yeah, I highly recommend that. That should be like the #1 tool. When you decided you were going to be an SEO, the first thing on your to-do list should have been buy a Scrapebox.
Now, so people know, Scrapebox does searches and parses the results and visits pages and looks for emails and does a million little Swiss Army knife things, right?
Scrapes images. I use it to check when we're doing mass backlinking to see, if something as simple as, are the sites getting redirected somewhere else? Are they giving us a 200 response? You can scrape images. You can do trackbacks if you want to, pingbacks. That was one of the big things that was being used for. There's like Kiri said, there's an expired domain plugin. That's an add-on, but that's really good as well. It looks like probably, I don't know if I want to make this the last question, is do you use Google Sites, Google Properties to rank in the maps? Ted doesn't rank in those. Ted's too busy making software.
I don't do much local. I usually defer to a local guy. So you're the honorary local.
You're local because Kyle's in here.
Well, we needed Jordan for that question.
Yeah. I use Google Sites, and I use Google Properties. And SI has tested those. Google Docs sends a lot of link juice. So it's a tool. Primarily, when that stuff first came out, it was taught, hey, you can rank these in and of themselves, and that's not so much the truth anymore. But they pass a hell of a lot of power. So if you're not using them, and you're just kind of wasting a free opportunity to get some juice from Google. There's like Terry Power, you see him in there. He's in some of the communities. Seek him out. He's got some interesting stuff on doing that. Seek out the semantic mastery guys. In particular, it's RYS Reloaded if you want to learn the real stuff behind all that Google property stuff, because they're the ones that really refine that method and made it good. And also Jimmy Kelly, he's got a new system too. I don't know if he's teaching that or not. I know he's selling those stacks. So it's to me, building those is really time consuming. But is it worth it for a tier 1 buffer? To me, yeah, it is, especially if I'm using Black Hat methods to build links.
So I have one last question for you, Clint. Next time we do a top factors, do you think we need to limit it to the top 25 instead?
I would think so. And then also be able to show before and after. I think we talked about this, is having this show once a month so everyone can see how things are progressing. And now that you have your first set of data, we can kind of compare those two. One of the things that might mess with that, though, is we're going to compare lower numbers. We're comparing a higher data set or a higher amount of data versus last month. So that might be an issue. But
eventually there'll be so much data in the shared Cora database that we'll have to look at a 30-day window. So we'll be comparing the recent 30-day window to a previous 30-day window.
Yeah, which will get a lot of value just when you're talking about algo updates, etc. So if we have a show and then all hell breaks loose and everyone's screaming there's an algo update and they all lost all their rankings, blah, 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 we can have data to show them what changed.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I want you to remember our YouTube experiment. So we're trying to figure out if YouTube's data claim that only 80% of our users are not subscribers watching our show. I want to see if this number is real, but to test that, I need you to hit the subscribe button. And what we'll do is next week, I'll let you know what kind of subscription spike we saw. And this will tell us how deep we can go into that 80% with a heartfelt plea. And based on how deep that spike goes, we can figure out if that 80-20 data they're telling us is bullshit or realistic. And so please hit subscribe, even if it's just for, till next show.
Yeah.
Give it a try. Join us.
Yeah, make sure you use the bell so that you get an email when we go live.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Hey, everybody.